I live in East Hartland, Connecticut now.
Okay. And in which war did you serve?
World War II,
And what was your branch of service?
the Air Corps,
Okay. What was your highest rank?
Staff Sergeant.
And in what general locations did you serve? Stateside as well as overseas?
And stateside, it would probably be the 8 weeks I spent at Lowry Field in Denver, Colorado.
Okay. And overseas?
And overseas, it was Ridgewell, England, near Ridgewell, England.
Okay. Well, to begin, why don't we start back in the beginning? Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted.
And where did you live at the time?
I lived at Godfrey, Illinois.
And do you remember roughly the date?
The date was sometime in June
Of
1942.
1942. Okay. Can you tell me, if you recall, why you joined?
Why I enlisted?
Yes.
Well, my number was coming up. They used to publish the numbers in the newspaper, and you kept track of that. You could tell about when your number was coming up, and I wanted to choose my own branch of service, so I enlisted in the branches in the Air Corps because that's what I thought would be the easiest to do, and I wanted to be a pilot anyway. I mean, it's more expensive, or more exciting.
And you were excited at the time. do you remember where you went right after enlisting?
Well, after enlisting, the schools were all full for the cadet schools. So I actually wasn't called up until February of the following year, of 1942. And then I went to Nashville, Tennessee for cadet training. And
That was to learn to fly?
well, had I not washed out.
That was the intent?
But almost the whole barracks was washed out because the schools were full, and you had to go to cadet school. A lot of other stuff to do. But
How long were you there?
at Nashville, I can't tell exactly. Probably 2 months,
Okay.
and we did mostly exercise and calisthenics and marching, and while we were waiting there. The Army is a lot of waiting.
Yes, there is.
Whether it's for your meals or for your education.
So you weren't selected to go forward as in pilot training?
No, I didn't go into pilot training at all. Through the psychological examinations that everyone had to go through. After that, I didn't pass those.
Okay. And then what did they do, reassign you at that point?
Well, shortly after that, we were sent to the warshops. That's what they called us. Were sent to Keesler Field, Mississippi, for basic training. That was supposed to be for 8 weeks.
What state is Keesler in?
Keesler Field, Mississippi.
Mississippi. Okay. Can you recall anything about that training that you'd like to share?
Well, it was mostly calisthenics, marching. I think that's about all we did there. That's all that I remember doing. We marched quite a bit. There was about an hour's marching, and calisthenics was about an hour too. And we ran 3 miles every morning. And the director of that was an athletic instructor, a college athletic instructor, and he asked me to be his assistant. So,
Oh, really?
Because I ran quite a bit in high school, and I was always leading in front. I didn't want to drag behind, but we had some awful slow guys too.
So So he was your drill instructor, or whatever they called him,
Yeah,
or drill sergeant,
he was the calisthenics
instructor, or whatever.
instructor. Yeah,
Okay.
he was a first lieutenant.
Did you learn other skills when you were in basic training?
Yes, we did. We had. I got a sharpshooter's medal, not a medal. I got a ribbon for the rifles. We shot rifles, and we did shoot some machine guns too. That's about all I remember about that.
And how many weeks was that training?
The whole
Roughly.
the whole training was 8 weeks.
8 weeks. And then your assignment was somewhere else after that?
After that, I went to Lowry Field to be a crew member on an aircraft.
So additional training at Lowry Field?
Yeah, I think that was 8 weeks also. And we had to put, the thing I remember, we had to put a machine gun together blindfolded. After a while, after we'd been studying the machine gun for a while and knew what all the parts did, and all I remember about it really was the back plate when the machine gun exploded took 40,000 pounds pressure, and that was the final item of the machine gun that you put on the back after you got the machine gun put back together.
And that was to hold all that pressure in?
Yes, yes,
Basically. Was this machine gun designed to be on an aircraft?
yes.
So, do you remember what type of machine gun it was, or model?
Other than the caliber 50 or
50 caliber.
I forget which one it was. There's a difference between caliber 50 and 50 caliber.
Oh, is there? I don't know that either. But a large round.
It's above ground.
Yeah. So, did you do any flight experience there, or was it strictly learning to?
We had one flight in a B-26 that took us up to 30,000 feet, just to see how we responded, I suppose. And I didn't get airsick, so
Okay.
so that sealed my future, I guess.
So your assignment at that point was to become what on the aircraft?
An aerial gunner of
Aerial
some
gunner.
kind. I hadn't been assigned to
Okay.
go for it yet.
But that was the training that was
Yes.
designed for.
Yeah.
So now after that training, do you recall anything else about that period of time when you were training?
Well, after the training, we had a final examination, and apparently I did all right on the examination because they offered me a teacher's position. And since that, I thought that would keep me in the States, so I jumped at the opportunity to teach.
Yeah.
And then I had to be sent to instructor school in Florida. So that was my next stop.
Okay. Do you remember where it was in Florida that you were sent?
Yeah, Fort Myers, Florida. I don't remember the name of the base.
Okay. And that was in
Andrew Carnegie was the writer. I have to say it right now so I remember what it was. He wrote the instructions for the teacher. I didn't meet him or anything like that, but he was popular at that time as a good writer, I guess. And I remember the course was by Andy Carnegie. It was a crash course. We were supposed to learn to teach in a month. So that's how long the school was down there.
Did you find that interesting?
Yeah, and it was very helpful later on. Later on, I taught a Sunday school class, and the pastor brought up the fact, well, the Army trained you to teach.
Well, that's probably true.
There's just a few things that you learn that you can apply whatever you're doing. It's
Sure.
just talking to someone else.
So that was a good memory in Florida for that
I
part
had a
of
good memory then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Were you by yourself at that point, or did you have family with you?
My wife
Back up a
came
bit.
down and stayed in Florida for a month. She enjoyed Fort Myers very much during the day, and then I would get to stay all night and have dinner with her in the evening. So it wasn't bad at all.
Yeah.
I got up early in the morning, however, before breakfast.
Sure. So when that training or that bit of training was done in Fort Myers, the next assignment was you would hope to be in the States instructing.
I hope to be in the States instructing, but I think that's when our group was formed. There were 40 teachers chosen to go over to start a school in England. And from Fort Myers, as I remember, we were sent to Brooklyn, New York. I don't believe we had any more training. We might have gone through there for some reason or other. We stopped in Goldsboro, South Carolina. And I don't remember what we did there. It wasn't there for very long because we were sent up to Brooklyn before very long for deportation.
How did you travel between all of these places? Was it by train or car?
By train.
By train?
Yep.
Between all the assignments
Yes,
that we mentioned?
Always.
Mhm.
Someplace or another, I left out going to Las Vegas.
Well, let's back up and talk about it.
Well, I think it was right after Lowry Field. I went to Las Vegas for air training, and we did fly somewhat in Las Vegas.
Clearly, it wasn't the Las Vegas we know today.
Well, it wasn't far from it. I remember
Really?
going into the strip. Then just one time I played a nickel slot machine and won $3.50.
Which was a lot of money.
I just never remembered that until just now, but I remember the $3.50.
Was that with a bunch of friends, or were you there by yourself?
No, I usually there were a couple of guys that
Yeah.
was with me. Yeah, that's all we did. As we didn't see any girly shows that I know of.
Hmm.
That's what I call them. I don't know what they call them. But
Was there an airfield outside of Las Vegas nearby?
yes,
And that's
there
where the
was.
training was?
Yes,
And the training there was for what purpose in Las Vegas?
to get a little air training to fly with airplanes, as far as I remember. That's about all I remember about it.
Were you firing weapons at that point?
We did have some machine gun training down there. We went for since when you're in an airplane, you're moving 300 some miles an hour, and the attacking aircraft, he's moving, so it's a different situation. You actually aim back of the target. If he's diving in towards you, you aim back of him because your airspeed will take your bullets up toward him. It's kind of
Interesting.
that's one of the things we learned in Las Vegas. I kind of tried to review this, but I couldn't remember the sequence in which it comes. But anyway.
Yeah. Other tricks that you learned there as far as firing on an enemy aircraft that you recall?
We didn't have any instruction on the aircraft. They took us in a field, kind of like a racetrack, and we were in the back of a pickup truck with shotguns, and every now and then, which we soon learned where they were, they'd shoot skeet out at us, and we would be moving, and of course the skeet were moving too, and we were supposed to shoot the skeet down, and that was kind of fun. We went around the track, and from time to time, we didn't know when they were going to shoot the skeet out, but when the skeet, we had to pay attention And when they shot the skeet out, we were supposed to just knock them down. And it's fun. You miss some, you hit some.
So that would be fun, I would think. Yeah.
But it simulates the two movements of the target and your own movement, which has to be accounted for.
Sure. Do you think that was realistic in general terms to what you experienced in play?
No.
As far as closure? No.
No, but it's as close as you can
As close
get.
you can get without flying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't really go up in an aircraft often when you were in Las Vegas?
No.
No. At all? Or
Some did. I was training for an instructor, but the ones who were training for crews, I understand that they went up and shot from the tail of an airplane. And the AT-6 would pull a target, so they would shoot from the B-17 to the target.
trailing behind the other
Yes.
aircraft?
Yes.
You weren't able to try that?
What?
You didn't try that yourself?
No,
You
I
didn't
didn't
experience
do
that?
that myself. No.
Okay.
I didn't try that much. I was supposed to be an instructor, and I don't know how you're going to teach somebody to shoot when you have never been in training yourself.
That's the Army.
That's the Army.
So
They had a big job, though. I give them credit for doing what they did with the millions of soldiers that they had at different training in the different areas. We had 2 million men, I understand, in the Air Force alone, the Air Corps.
and limited aircraft, I would think. So
Yes.
yeah.
And of that 2 million people, there are not a whole lot that are going to be flying combat. Takes many more people on the ground to
Absolutely.
support somebody in combat.
Sure. So you were there, and at some point in the middle of all of these other trainings, probably
Yes.
after Lowry Field, you
I
felt,
think it
or-
was after Lowry Field,
and perhaps before
because I
Fort
was being
Myers.
trained as I'm not sure where it was either,
it doesn't-
because after Lowry Field, I know I went to instructor school
Yep.
down in Florida.
And then you traveled up to. We were at the point where you were traveling up to Brooklyn. You felt at some point. Was that just staging, getting ready to leave? Do you think, or was there more training in Brooklyn?
You know, that might have been when the trip to Las Vegas came in. Was between Fort Myers and Brooklyn, and then from Las Vegas, we possibly went up to. I don't know.
Was your wife able to travel with you beyond the Florida
No,
connection? No.
she joined me. What was it? In Denver, Colorado, for 8 weeks. And that's where I learned to eat eggs. I'm sure that's important.
Of course it is. Everything's
I
important.
never liked eggs, but the residents of Denver were very nice, and she got a room, and they let wives come out and stay in spare bedrooms, and we had the kitchen privileges with I think her name was Robinson. And very nice people that let us use their house. They were there too, and but they both worked. So we had eggs for breakfast out there, and my wife taught me to eat eggs, starting with boiled eggs. And I love eggs now.
Now, I don't remember that we talked to. I may have forgotten, but did we talk about Denver before? And where in the sequence might that have been?
Well, that was when I was at Lowry Field, early on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was nearby Lowry Field. That was actually, that is Denver. Lowry Field is in Denver.
Yes, well,
Okay.
just
Or
ahead to
outside of
yes,
Denver.
just outside of Denver.
Okay. All right. Now we're back to Brooklyn again.
Brooklyn. And we were there for 2 weeks, as I understand. I think just waiting for a boat to take us across the ocean, and I got to go into New York for a couple of times, but
Do you remember what you did?
yeah, we went to an SOS. Is that what they call it? No, it was a
USO?
USO thing. One night, I had a friend from the South. I don't know exactly what southern state, but he was a genuine Southerner, because we went in the USO and we were sitting down drinking a Coke, and they had a dance floor there, and the girls from the neighborhood, I guess, all came in to dance, and they had to dance with anybody that asked them to dance. And we were sitting there drinking our Coke, and a black man came by dancing with a white girl, and my friend said, "We're through here," and he got up, and so we both left. I had to go with him.
How did you feel about that at the time?
Well, I was kind of surprised because we didn't have any racial discrimination in Ohio or Illinois, but he was from the deep South, and racial discrimination was very much in vogue there. I mean,
Did you find that in the service as well?
oh yes. Well, not in the service. We were segregated. I mean, I never flew with any black soldiers, but they had their own units, which did just as well as ours. Of course.
Yes, as we know now. Yes, absolutely. So now we're in Brooklyn, and you've been able to enjoy New York a little bit.
Yeah.
Waiting to go, and then eventually.
I went to an opera, I remember, and I think I was by myself that night, and I went to an opera because I'd never been to an opera before, and I was up on the 7th floor, looking down at all the, and I'm not an opera fan. To me, I didn't understand it, and I remember the opera was a very popular one. I forget the name. I can remember it sometimes, but anyway, it was an interesting affair. I didn't like it a bit, so I left about after the first act, I think.
When you went into the city, did you wear your uniform?
Oh yes.
Back then.
Oh yeah, we had.
You were always in uniform.
Always in uniform. Yeah, I didn't have civilian clothes with me then.
And that was fine. Everyone accepted.
Oh yeah, we practically free almost everything. It was either a reduced price or free.
So we were well respected.
Probably couldn't afford it otherwise.
So you were well respected at the time.
Oh yes, yes. Oh, everybody during the World War II, everybody was more or less together. They had a respect for one another because we realized that our parents were on gas rationing and sugar rationing and some other things that were rationed that we didn't have to go through because we had we were very well fed in the Air Force.
So now you said you were getting ready to leave on a ship.
Yes.
Do you remember boarding the ship or what
Yes,
type of
I
a
do.
ship it was?
It was a Uruguay. The name of the ship was a Uruguay, and it was a ship similar to the Queen Mary, not as large, but it was a passenger ship that had been converted to carrying troops overseas, and we were housed in the below deck. I don't know which floor below deck, because I think there were at least two floors below deck, and we slept in tiers, the 3 bunks instead of just 2, and I had a top bunk in the Uruguay, and I remember that, and I played, I think, 100 games of chess on the way over because it took us 10 days to get over. We didn't go straight over. We had a. I didn't see the destroyers that were supposed to be guarding us, but we were told that they were protecting us and flying, or not flying, but
Still
guarding
more
us. Yeah.
Were you during the day? Did you go topsides, or were you down below the
Oh
whole
no,
time?
no! We went topside,
Yeah.
and as far as I'm concerned, we didn't have any storms that I remember. It was pretty nice weather, and didn't particularly enjoy cruising, but the food was good, and I played chess during the daytime. We went with another fellow that liked to play chess, and that's all we did.
Pass the time.
Yeah.
Then, do you remember arriving in England?
Yeah, we landed in Liverpool. And from Liverpool, I don't know how long we stayed there, not very long, overnight I think. And then we went down directly to our the field where we were stationed, which was Ridgewell, England.
Was that the name of the town as well?
That's the name of the town.
Ridgewell, England.
The 381st Bomb Group was the only name that I remember as for the airfield.
Was there a particular part of the 381st you belonged to when you were assigned?
Yeah, that was divided in 4 squadrons, and I was in the 34th Squadron, I believe.
Okay.
Maybe it was the 33rd, but I believe it was. And the most interesting thing was shower. We had shower rooms, which were concrete squares with a latrine probably in one end, and the showers were in the other part of it, and on the end of the shower room was our exercise room, where it was a weightlifting. That's where we started weightlifting, and they had lots of windows in that little concrete building, but no glass in the windows. And in the wintertime, it was kind of cold for a shower.
So just openings
Yeah,
with nothing in between.
nothing.
Okay.
That might be interesting to somebody.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of cool.
What time of the year was that when you arrived? Do you recall?
Well, we arrived in May. England is beautiful in May.
And would that have been what year? 1940.
That would be in I was over there 13 months. So that would be in 1940, the latter part of 1943, probably.
Okay.
And because I was discharged in 45.
Okay.
And let's see.
So England was nice in May.
Oh, it was beautiful, beautiful. It's so green in the springtime. I never saw. I remember that the grass just looks so green. I think it's greener than it is here. You know.
Were you able to go? Did you have to stay on the airbase, or were you able to
No,
go into
we got
town?
pass every two weeks if we wanted it. But there wasn't much to do outside. Cambridge was 25 miles away, and London more than that. I don't know how far it was. But we did go into Cambridge, not every 2 weeks, but occasionally. And I had a friend, Stan Boyle, who became a minister after the war in California, and That's when I accepted Christ too, after the war. So it was kind of interesting. But Stan was a good man, a little taller than I am, better looking, and and a little older. And so one time we rode our bicycles. Everybody had a bicycle, and it was only 26 inches, and it's more tiring to ride a smaller bicycle. But we rode our bicycles into Cambridge. That's 25 miles, and I remember it was much longer than we thought it was going to be. But we stayed for bed and breakfast. We at a bed and breakfast house always in Cambridge. We got one couple that welcomed us into our house, and I never will forget the lady of the house. When we came down for breakfast in the morning, we had better. She went over and sat on my friend's lap. She liked it. I said he was better looking.
And you were married.
Yeah, I was married. Yeah, and he wasn't. That's true. But I wouldn't. I wasn't expecting any company either. So. And he wasn't either, for that matter. And her husband was there too at the table, and that was kind of a surprise. But anyway, I guess she enjoyed it. So anyway.
So you just spend one day in the town then, and then back out to the base again? Is that how it would work?
No, we would go in on a Friday night if we could. Well, when we rode bikes, of course, we had to wait. We had to go on a Saturday. But if we could, we'd go on Friday night. They had trucks that would take us into to the city at certain times, and come and get us at certain times. They had a general. Other guys were going. That was just the two of us, and they stayed in bed and breakfast too. I think some of them probably stayed in hotels, but. In Cambridge, we didn't do much except sightsee. We did go to the campus, Cambridge College campus, and when we went one time, I just remembered this. One time we were later, and they closed everything up, so we were locked in. So we went down, and they had a steel fence all around the campus with spikes in the tops of the. But we climbed over those fences anyway and got out of there. I don't know whether anybody ever saw us or not, but at least nobody stopped us. There's a couple of dumb Americans that.
Is that the same Cambridge University as today?
Yes, that was Cambridge University.
Famous university, yeah.
So when someone asked me what I did in England, I went to Cambridge University.
And that's true. So, when you were at Ridgewell, back on the base, what was daily life like when you weren't off base?
Well,
outside of pumping iron with
we had to get up in the morning for breakfast, and I think that was 7 o'clock. And after breakfast, we had to have calisthenics and marching. And then we went to work. I was a gunnery instructor, and we went to the school, which was a big building, quite large for England especially, and it had our teaching activities were mostly taking care of a jam-handy room, which had a 180-degree roof inside, plastered, and moving cameras in there, which ran airplanes over the ceiling. And down below where we were, we had, I think, 3 machine gun stations that were electronic machine guns, and they were supposed to the students came in for about a half an hour every other day because they didn't fly, but every other day. And so the day is off. They came in. They had to come in. They were signed to come in and play with those machine guns for I don't know whether it was a half an hour or an hour, but anyway. But they didn't have much respect for us because we'd never been up in a combat yet.
How did back to that you, and I lost what you called it. I think you called it a jam handy, or
Yeah, it was
how's that spelled? Just so that I get it right.
JAMH.
Just like it is. Okay, jam handy. And that was almost like an early video game in sorts. Is that,
yes,
am
it
I
was.
picturing it correctly? Yeah.
Because they shot the electronic bullets and at the airplanes that were coming out from they didn't know exactly where. And
was it automatically scored, or were you as instructors just visually looking at the?
They were scored, but nobody ever paid any attention. We didn't do that.
Huh.
It wasn't too difficult to bring him down. And actually, looking back on it, it wasn't a very good simulation because the guns weren't moving, and in actual combat, you're moving about 300 miles an hour, and the attacking plane is moving too. So it was a different situation altogether. But I think maybe it was just the combat crews only flew every other day, I believe, and on their day off, it was something to keep them busy. They had the government did a lot of that, just to keep the guys from not having anything to do, because you get in trouble when you don't have anything to do.
So is that all you did when you were at that air base, or were you assigned to other things there as well?
That's all we did. We did have calisthenics, as I mentioned, I think. And on our days off, we went to the weight room, and we had about a half a dozen guys that worked out with weights. We didn't have any instructor, but we played around with them anyway. And the amusing thing about that, we had a fellow that was 35 years old from Minneapolis, Illinois, and we called him Old Man Ingram because we were in our early 20s, all of us, and we called him Old Man Ingram.
At some point, you had an opportunity to fly or not? Or were you just strictly instructing on the ground?
We were instructors on the ground.
And did you ever have a chance to get in an aircraft?
Well, that's kind of a sad story, but that was after the war was over. Would you like to hear that?
Sure. So you didn't get in a B-17 while you were at that air base?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
Except in the school, we did have turrets. We put guys in turrets, I believe, in addition to that jam handy. I believe we did have turrets to put in so that they would know what to do if they were assigned to a turret. But generally, they came over in crews, and they were already assigned to their position.
Sure. So you never had to go like on that B-17, the Honey? Did you ever fly on that yourself?
Just the last mission. Yeah. That's the only time I was on Honey.
I think I recall you saying that you may have been on 6 flights, which earned you the Air Medal at some point.
Yeah.
Do you recall the 6 flights and how you went from being an instructor to beginning to fly?
We flew when they needed a ball turret gunner. They would call me because I was 5'7". I guess. I think that's most. I never fired a machine gun in the turret. before I went on the first flight. You might say I wasn't exactly an instructor, but anyway, that's the way the Army works too. You learn pretty quick.
Sure.
I knew about a turret. I knew as an instructor I had to know all the turrets actually, how to operate them. But there were only two at the time. The Stafford store, the top turret and the ball turret.
On a B-17.
On a B-17. So.
So when they needed additional crew,
Yes.
they would ask you to fly on an aircraft.
Supernumerary is what they called it.
Okay.
And that's why I never knew when I was going to fly. That's why when the quartermaster came through and shook my toe, it was such a terrifying. That was the scariest part of the whole work.
They'd wake you up in the morning if they needed you to fly a mission.
4 o'clock in the morning, yes. And then we had to get up and get dressed and get our breakfast. And they always had good breakfast. And I think I learned to eat eggs there too, because we had that, I think, every morning. Mm-hmm. But it was a good breakfast. The Air Force never, we had good food all the time. And then went down to breakfast, and then we went, our assignments were posted, found out where we were supposed to be, and I'd report to the captain or whoever was flying the ship. The pilot was the boss, and we would try to find out where we were going because we weren't briefed. The crew, the bombardier navigator and the 2 pilots were briefed, but the crew wasn't briefed. And we'd ask how many gallons, the crew chief, how many gallons of gas did you put in today? And if they said 2780, we knew that was going to be a long journey because that was the tops. And when somebody comes back from being in the Air Force and say they were a pilot, B-25 or B-24, and if I say B-17, I always ask them, how many gallons of gas did you take? And I don't remember. I know they were lying because almost everybody that came back that said they were in the Air Corps was a pilot. Most of them were fighter pilots, so.
Of course. So if you had a very heavy load, you knew you were going further.
Yeah, we were going further. We went to Bordeaux though one time. We didn't anticipate that, and we lost an engine. We never came back with all 4 engines working. We always at least 1 engine out. Sometimes 2.
Were they shot out, or they just would have mechanical problems?
I don't know for sure, but I think that when you lose 1 engine, it puts a strain on the others. And this is just my idea, but then pretty soon another one would go out because we landed with just 2 engines many times. So, many, or 6. I don't know, maybe a couple of times.
So the number of total flights you actually did fly into combat were 6?
Yes.
And can you remember what it was like the first time you went on a combat flight?
Well, I didn't have to get in the turret until just before we went over the English Channel. So, and we never took off with me in the turret. We never got in the turret when it was going to land or when it was taking off. But when we were approaching the English Channel, I had to get in and we all had intercom all the time. Even, I don't understand that either. Maybe we didn't either. And anyway, when I got in the turret, then I made sure you're supposed to charge your guns because they weren't charged before that. And then you waited. And that's what it was mostly like. It's waiting on the ground for chow and waiting in the air to get to the target. but you're making an 8-hour flight and you're only over the target about a half an hour or less, much less in some cases, I'm sure. Although I don't know of anybody that really timed, maybe the pilot did.
Do you remember what you were thinking or how you felt on the first flight as you took off?
The first flight, I don't remember how I felt, but I was watchful. I know that. Trying to get acquainted with everything.
Yeah.
And I'd really never flown in Bull's Heart before. And you had to get well, I knew we had been trained some in school to use the ball turret. As an instructor, I had to learn how to use all the turrets briefly. I mean, you learn it and you're supposed to remember.
Yeah.
So the first flight, I don't remember, but I remember I didn't know what was happening, so it felt like somebody threw a shovel full of gravel on the side of the ship. And I didn't know what it was at first, but I found out it was flak that came through and was putting some holes in our ship. But as far as I know, the turret never got hit. So, but one of the fellows ahead of me that flew before I did, his turret had been hit, direct hit, and killed him. But of course, they couldn't get his body out until they were trying to land, and then they put his. But I didn't see any of that.
So the flak, if you could describe what flak was and exactly how that affected the aircraft, and for the people that might not know what flak is.
Well, flak is a piece of metal about a quarter or a half an inch thick and about an inch or 2 inches. It wasn't square, but that's about the size. If it was square, it was very flak was the shell of a bomb, or a large shell, but and it left a terrible wound if it hit someone. I've seen some wounds that it left in a man's leg or something.
Was that fired from the ground up, trying to?
Yes. Yeah, and it was supposed to be by radar, but we had planes that flew in ahead of us. Fighter planes, possibly bombers, I don't know, that dropped tinfoil. They call it confetti. And you wouldn't have it because you weren't high enough. But they would drop the confetti that would confuse the radar in the anti-aircraft guns. And so they couldn't tell exactly what height we were. And their anti-aircraft guns were set to go off at a particular height. This is the way I have understood it or learned it, although I didn't go to school to learn that. It could be mere hearsay. I don't know for sure.
But you saw the flak when it came up close.
That we were aware of.
What was that experience like? What did it look like and feel like? I know you said it felt like, the first time it felt like something was hitting the aircraft, but
yeah.
As you subsequent flights or experiences?
Actually, we didn't pay much attention to it after that, unless I don't know how far the explosion reached. From the explosion, how far away it would be damaging to the aircraft, possibly a half mile. I don't know what that was, but
so it would explode and scatter this metal out of the aircraft.
But I didn't really hear that in the ball turret. I didn't hear any of that. I was kind of by myself down there.
Now, where were you positioned as an example as you got over the target? Were you behind what happened when you got over The,
Oh, the
over the
Bombays were
bomb.
ahead of me. I could see that the bombs dropped, but I couldn't follow them because we would be at 300 miles an hour. We would be too far away. I did see bombs falling, and I did see explosions on the ground, little bats. Looks like somebody striking matches, but and smoke from the damage the bombs were doing.
Do you recall how high you were? What altitude you would fly at,
We
roughly?
were flying roughly between 20,000 and 30,000 because they would vary it, and probably with each mission. So I'm not sure.
Did you have pressurized cabins or oxygen?
We had oxygen. I think it was individually. Yeah, we had we had to have an oxygen mask on.
Mhm.
I remember that. So it would be something we carried.
Was it cold?
Oh yeah, it was 50 degrees. Guys, we would take Hershey bars up and get them frozen, and they're delicious after a frozen turkey Hershey bar.
So you bundled up in clothing, yeah. So there was no heat on board.
No, we had a heated suit when I flew. Now, I made one practice mission someplace, probably Lowry Field, where I had the sheepskin clothing when I didn't have a heated suit, but in combat we had the heated suits.
Mm-hmm. So now you dropped the bombs over the target.
Yeah.
And where did you go from there? Do you turn and head
we
back
had to
home?
stay in formation. We weren't allowed to break formation unless when you lost an engine, sometimes you couldn't keep up, so you had to be by yourself, and that was the dangerous part for the gunners because the German fighter planes were looking for stragglers like that couldn't keep up with the formation, couldn't keep the altitude, and you're more or less by yourself instead of being in formation. And when, I don't know. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, you did. And then you would turn after the entire formation would then turn
Yes.
and head back to
Yeah,
England.
as soon as we finished, everybody dropped their bombs. Then we'd finish. We did have one interesting thing. The bombs hung up one time. There were 3 bombs left in the bomb bay, and we had been taught in school as an instructor. I'd been taught how to release a bomb if there was one hung up in the bomb bay. Well, so had the engineer that flew top turret, and he had to get out of the top turret, go down and put one foot on the bomb bay was open, and he had to put one foot on the catwalk across in between the bombs, and the other foot on an open door, and release that bomb. And he couldn't. There wasn't room, and he couldn't work with a parachute on. And this fella did that. I'd never seen anything that was as nervy as that. And he released all 3 of those bombs before. But if he hadn't been able to do that, I was next in line to do that because I was the only one that knew it.
And that was with the bomb bay doors open, so basically the wind blowing in.
Yeah, and there wasn't room for a parachute. He was there on his own.
Mm-hmm. If you didn't release them, were they altitude sensitive? Were they charged where you couldn't have them on board, or what was the fear that you couldn't land with them?
We couldn't land with them. I know that. I remember that because they wouldn't hold up to the pressure of landing. It never happened, and so I really don't know what. But I imagine I don't know what they would have done. Probably tried to land. I don't know, because otherwise it would just be everybody bail out, and that would be the cost of the whole airplane. So
Were you wearing a parachute when you were up the entire time?
I wasn't.
No.
I didn't. There wasn't room for a parachute in the ball turret, so I had a parachute up, but I was up in that plane.
So if you ran into trouble, you had to be able to get out of your turret and up and put on a parachute and then be able to try to parachute out. Were you trained to know how to be a paratrooper as well?
We were told to pull the, as I recall, that's only the instructions we had, to put your parachute on. There was a chest chute, and you pulled the thing.
Released it?
Released it.
Jump and release.
If it didn't release, I don't know what you were supposed to do.
So I know you said earlier that out of the 6 missions you were on, that more than once you had lost at least one engine.
Oh yes, we never came back with all the engines. I mean, with all 4 engines working.
Were you able to make it back every time from a mission?
Yeah.
Back to England?
Yeah. With 3 engines, we flew all right then. Except in the ball turret, you could always see the engine that was out. Except it would fly, it would turn, but very slowly from the movement of the airplane.
I know you had mentioned earlier about in our private conversations about an aircraft that was named Honey, which was the name. Did every aircraft have a kind of a nickname, call it, or
it wasn't a nickname. It was painted on the side of the plane, and every aircraft had. Well, Betty Boop was one I remember, and their famous one is. What was the Memphis Belle?
Yes, I do remember saying that.
Yeah.
So one of the ones you flew on had the name Honey on the side of it?
The one that I went down in had the name of the Honey. I don't remember the others except Betty Boop, I think, and some other name like that, cartoon name.
Can you recollect the mission you were on with Honey? I think you had said it was maybe the 5th mission you were on?
It was the 5th mission, yes. And I don't remember anything that was unusual about it until we lost the first engine, and then we lost the second engine. I think the pilot let us know that we were going to have to. He gave us a choice. We could bail out if we wanted to. We could parachute out, but no one did.
Were you over enemy territory when this happened?
Yes, we were. Yes, we were, because we didn't get over. Well, we were only 25 miles over in our territory, or in Belgium.
When you came back, but when it first began, when you were losing engines, were you on the German
we were
side?
Over Germany, yeah, we were over enemy. Well, I'm not. We might be over Holland or something. I don't know.
And you started losing engines. Was that from enemy fire? Flak?
I don't know for sure. I don't know. If you lost one, I know it put a strain on the other 3, and if you lost 2, it put even more strain on the 2. I know that. But whether that really affected them mechanically or not, I don't know.
So you had lost 2 engines, and did you still have 2 left, or did you lose a 3rd one?
We had a 2 for a while, and then it tells you in that little pamphlet. It tells you in order what, but that could be wrong, because they have the things about me wrong. They said we went down on November the 10th. I remember that, and I also remember reading in the paper 1,000 planes bombed Germany that day, and we only lost 12, and everybody was real happy. Except one of the 12, I was on one of the 12.
You weren't as happy. So at some point you went and you lost the 3rd engine, if I recall.
Yes. It tells you in that little pamphlet.
Right, but for this record.
Yeah.
since they can't read
No, they
the
can't.
interview. So, could you recollect what happened at that point? So now you're down 3 out of 4 engines.
And the pilot said we were losing 700 feet a minute and we were going to crash land. And that's when he gave us the privilege of parachuting if we wanted to or not, because we were losing altitude. I guess with 2 engines, we didn't really lose it. Well, we couldn't keep up with the formation, and I don't know whether we lost altitude or whether we slowed down on purpose. You know, we might have to save.
Was the pilot trying to get back to friendly territory at that point?
He was planning to get. I think he'd been shot down once before. I think that little thing you have will tell about that, but he was trying to. He knew he was going to crash land, or try to bring it down with 1 engine. But that's kind of risky too. If that last engine goes out 1,000 feet above the ground, you're hurt. And,
do you remember much about that time? Do you recall that entire
I
incident?
didn't think of all that. I just thought of that lately. If I start thinking about those things now, I get scared. I get scared to death. I don't know how in the world I ever did it, but at the time, I don't remember, except that when you get on the ground and you walk away from that plane, everybody talks like a magpie. Even after a mission, everybody talks like a magpie. I don't know whether that was true with your experience or not, but we did. You just had to talk, and I think it was a release of your tension that you've been under, because you didn't talk. You didn't talk like they do in the movies. You didn't talk on the intercom or anything. And this.
Were you still in the ball turret, which is underneath the aircraft, the one you were on, and you're getting ready to crash land? Were they putting landing gear down, ready to land, or did they leave the landing gear up?
No, they left it up because they knew they wouldn't be going to a landing field. You know. But
and you were
the
still.
pilot forgot of me. He forgot me, and I had to call in and ask him for permission to leave, because I heard him talking on the intercom, and we'd lost 3 engines, and we were preparing to crash land, and I called him and asked him if I could get out of the turret, and he says, "Yeah, ball gunner, I'm sorry, I forgot you."
It's getting a little lonely down there.
I afterwards, you know, I didn't think about it too much then, but afterwards, I thought to myself, because the ball turret was smashed into 1,000 pieces when we landed on the belly. There's a lot of weight in a plane, even though they build them as light as they can.
Do you remember the impact?
I do, to some extent, yeah.
Were you strapped in, or?
We had a landing procedure, and everybody got in the radio room, and they sat down with their backs up against the bulkhead that went into the bomb bay, and I don't know who was in first, but I was next to the last because the tail gunner was after me, and we got in and spread our legs out so that our bodies were together, and then when we hit, there wasn't really a jar for us. There was a jar, but it wasn't a lot of pressure, even though we had to maintain our airspeed, which was over 130 miles an hour for a B-17, I believe. And flying with just 1 engine, I'm sure they were getting as much speed as they could to keep it in the air. And we heard the bump when we hit. That was a huge bump. But after that, when we were skidding, there was kind of a relief too. We knew what was happening, and we probably skidded the length of a football field. I don't know, but you had to be going so fast, over 130 miles an hour, just to keep from going down, straight down. So anyway.
And that was landing in a field, or
Yeah, in a pasture. There are cows in the pasture, but we're re-landed. And I was thinking the navigators, uh, it was the navigator and the pilot who had to pick out where they were going to land, because looking from the air, you wonder, are you going to have a lot of timber? You're going to have woods? You're going to have creeks or lakes or whatever? And I would think it's kind of a tough job to find a pasture that looks good. And we found one. Because you don't have time to prepare for a landing and make a circle or something.
sure.
You just got to break it down. But I can't laud the pilots. Well, they're
Fairly skilled, I would think.
very skilled. Yeah, I'm sure they didn't particularly think of the responsibility they had of 8 other guys there, or 7 other guys. Besides, there were 9 of us on a plane. But yeah, and looking back, I'm sure that the Lord was the reason we stayed afloat. And there's the water, there was the English Channel.
Was not a good option.
No, but we had what we called a Mae West, which was a life jacket. Mm-hmm. We had that on underneath the parachute.
Sure.
So if we'd had that.
So you come to this nice soft landing in a field and come to a stop. Do you recall, were you relieved when you finally came to a stop, and did everyone rush out, or?
Oh, that was the #1 rule, yeah. The tail gunner was in front of me because I was next to him. And he ran out. We had one engine on fire, and he grabbed there was a fire extinguisher right beside the door, and he grabbed that fire extinguisher on the way out and put the fire out it was on the inside right hand side. I don't know what engine that is, but it was a small fire. It wasn't a big one, but he put that fire out so the plane didn't explode. And had he let it go, it would have eventually exploded, but because the gas tanks are in the plane or in the wings on a B-17.
Was anyone injured in the landing?
No one. Absolutely not.
That's
good. We all got out and as fast as possible and got away from the plane in case there was an explosion. And then the pilot, we just did what he said. He was the guy that made the decisions. And we went into a little town, East Belgium, and went into the tavern. And I don't remember anybody especially getting a drink. I know they didn't get more than one. Well, I don't carry any money. I didn't carry any money with me. And the Belgian people were thankful for us, I've had people say that somebody wanted to thank us for helping us, helping in the war over there, and but.
Well, at that point in the war, wasn't that occupied territory just prior to that period of time, I would think, wasn't it?
It was occupied just prior to that, yeah. Patton was just 25 miles from us. I mean,
so you made it just inside the friendly territory. At that point, it had just been...
And that the pilots planned it that way because we wanted to get down as fast as possible, But everybody did their own job, did it very well.
So now you're in Belgium.
We're in Belgium, and
did you spend the night there, or
no? about 3 or 4 hours. We stayed in the tent in the bar, and an English, we called them limeys, truck came out. It was a box cut truck. They were looking for German prisoners, or Germans, not prisoners, but Germans that had fled, I imagine, fled into Belgium to keep from being arrested or something. But anyway, that's what they were looking for, Germans. And you know, as soon as the pilot, he knew who to call, and I'm sure that we had already been reported down, because other planes watch other planes to see what's happened, and they, especially when a plane goes down, you watch to see if anybody parachutes out, and so I'm sure that they knew more about where we were and what was happening than we did. We didn't have cell phones then, but they used the tavern's phone, and he knew who to call. And the English people picked us up and took us into Belgium. And the paper says hospital. The hospital was a gymnasium. I remember that. And I already told you how well, first thing we could all line up and get a shot of whiskey. For some reason or other, that was supposed to calm us down. But anyway, it wasn't bad. I haven't had too many shots of whiskey in my life, but anyway.
You deserved that one.
I enjoyed that one. And then I told you about that when I took my plate out in back of the gymnasium where we were supposed to leave our trays. They had a metal tray about 2 feet long.
With food?
Yeah. And I'd eaten supper and left some pork chops, bones there with probably a little meat on them, and I don't know what all I did eat. I know I didn't eat all my meal, but when I went out back of the gymnasium, there was this, well, I don't know whether I can tell that again or not. There was this woman standing there, a Belgian woman, with a little girl, about 6 or 7, I guess. And she had pots, a couple of pots, one for us to put our liquids in, if we had liquids, for coffee or something like that, and the other one for food. And we dumped our empty plates, our scraps from our plates into that pot that she had, and I think she probably made stew of it that night. I don't know, but anyway.
So that was food to them.
To them, it was a living, yes, and that impressed me more than practically anything else I did. I wish I'd known she was out there.
They couldn't come in the building. There were just residents waiting outside.
They were allowed to wait out there, though. And she was the only one there. She and her little girl. There may have been others there ahead of time. I don't know. I don't know what went on in that building all the time. I know they slept there. That's where we slept too, and they ate there. So they made full use of that gymnasium. And then the next day, I don't believe we were there more than that one night. I believe that's all. I'm sure that's all. And they picked us up in the C-47. And that was the freight car of the war. And C-47, and they flew us back to England. And then when I got back and went to my barracks, and I told you this a little bit, they had the quartermaster had rolled up my bunk, the mattress, and the covers of my bunk were rolled up, and it was in November, so I had received some Christmas presents and cookies, and the guys, of course, had divided up my presents, whatever I had. I remember one was a hairbrush, and they brought my presents back, but the cookies never were returned. And
did they think you weren't coming back, that you were lost? Is that why it rolled
yeah,
up your
they
bum?
thought when a plane goes down. Well, we lost several crews that way. I remember at least two, and Rossellini was the guys of one name, and he never came back. He was gone. I don't know whether he was a prisoner or what happened. They never tell you it.
Do you recall the name of the pilot in the Honey?
No, but it's in that paper that you have.
All right, so now you're back to your air base, but
Well,
you still have one more flight at that point.
yeah, and
I can imagine. Can you recall how it felt now after you'd just gone through a crash landing and at some point you had one more mission to fly?
no, but they just let me do that. If they'd asked me, I'd probably said no, I don't want any more. But they wanted to give me an air medal, I think, and the chances are I wouldn't be shot down, again, or I don't know what the chances are really. But anyway,
That was uneventful, the last mission?
uneventful. We got rid of our. I was very, very happy to get back on the ground, and I didn't know that was going to be my last mission. But so that's why I won another. And it was late in the war too.
Mm-hmm.
They had other people coming in, and I did see some things that were not pleasant. I don't know whether you want to hear those or not.
Sure.
But my friend and I, Stan Boyle, were standing out watching them come in one afternoon. Many times we did, because if they were wounded on board, they shot a flare out and they got to land first. And they were in the pattern to land, and there were about 30 planes that were flying, and two of them crashed, or one of them ran into the other one at maybe a couple thousand feet. They didn't have a chance, and there's 18 guys there, and those two planes fell down and crashed about a mile from the field, and that was bad. And then there was one more incident you might want to know. After the war, everybody was really, we heard it over the loudspeaker and we were very happy. And one of the captains, a pilot, the captain, got permission to fly to Ireland, I suppose to get whiskey and linen. That's what Ireland is famous for. And my friend and I, Stan, were invited. My lieutenant invited us to go, my first lieutenant. He'd been through the rough part of the war with 25 missions, and he got a field commission. And he invited us to go with him.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah, Lieutenant Hart, Wayne W. Hart, from Ashtabula, Ohio. Ooh, what a memory I've got. But he had to okay all my mail, and he was such a nice guy. He never even read it, he just signed his name. And anyway, so we went up to the line. We rode our bikes up to the line where they were loading, and there were 30 guys on board, right already. And of course they were in the bomb bay as well as in the rest of the plane. B-17 would easily hold 30 guys. And there may be been that many with me when I flew home, but they were going to fly to Ireland. Well, they took off. They flew. They ran into bad weather and flew into the side of a mountain and killed them all, and including my how he could go through 25 of the roughest missions that we ever had. And the early B-17s, they'd easily lose half of the planes that went over there because they didn't have the escort that they had when we were there. Now the P-51s were our escort, and we didn't see a fighter. I didn't see a fighter plane at all. By any identification, we were trained to identify a 109 or whatever it was. And after flying all those missions and living through all the war, and then to be killed in a mission like that is almost unbelievable, you know. But
that was the lieutenant as well.
Yeah, my first lieutenant. He was.
Why didn't you go on that trip? You said he invited you.
My friend, he was a little older than I was, and he says, "I don't think we ought to go. There's too many guys on there." And so we turned around and went home.
Fate.
That was the Lord taking care of us.
Did you stay? That was the end of the war then. So the end of the war happened when you were in England.
Yeah, we heard it over the loudspeaker, and that Germany had surrendered, you know. So then after that, we had to get up. We were supposed to pack all our stuff up, or the things that we had in the school, the turrets. We had some turrets and all the machine guns and stuff like that, because we did have them in the school. Sometime we practiced with them, but I don't know what. But anyway, we were supposed to pack them all up to send them back home. Well, our lieutenant, that was Lieutenant Hart, had us dig a big hole.
And bury you.
And we buried the whole bunch of the stuff. And that was the way we packed them up to come home. And we got ready to come home. And we got out of there in about 2 weeks and flew back to be repositioned.
Did you fly back in a B-17?
I flew back on B-17 with the colonel of the field. So I was an instructor. And there were, I don't know how many people there were on our plane, probably between 20 and 30 probably. It was.
How many hours did it take to fly a B-17 from England to the States? Do you recall?
27 hours.
27 with no stops, or you stopped for refueling?
We stopped several times, about 3 times I think. And one of them was Greenland, but we didn't get out to visit or anything. We had to stay on the boat, on the base, and then one was pretty close here. I forget what it is, just off of the.
Nova Scotia, up that way somewhere, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we flew into Bradley Field, and I went to a phone booth. And called my wife. Sorry, I'm just
no reason to be sorry.
And I didn't know when we were going to be home, but they got us out of there. We had in Bradley Field. We just stood in a Quintet hut, or what do they call them, and flew back. I think we flew to Chicago, and then from there down to, no, I took a train from Florida down to where I lived in southern Illinois. And my wife and her dad met me at the airport, or no, at the train station. And they were almost like strangers. And in the movies they grab each other and hug them, Yeah, I hugged my wife, but it wasn't that big a hugger. And
I'm sure she was happy to see you, though.
Huh?
I'm sure she was happy to see you.
We were glad to see each other, but it took me a while to get reacclimated. I walked around, and if I go to a city, I'd walk with my head down. There were psychological effects there, and I don't know what it was, but I was, I didn't want to look at people. I was afraid to look up and see people. So anyway, and I was off for about 2 or 3 weeks before my company called me. They called me and said, asked me if I wanted to work again, and I said, I worked for I said it was Western Electric division, AT&T. We were owned by AT&T, and did the work we were changing when we ran out of materials. We were changing the telephones from the switchboard over to a dial phone. The dials didn't last very long. I don't know whether you remember that or not.
I remember dials.
Do you remember?
Sadly, yes. Sadly, yes.
And,
do you recall how were you welcomed home after the war, or was it in your communities?
I don't remember the welcoming committees or that. The people that you knew welcomed us back, and I got into civilian clothes as soon as I could. I remember, though, when I was home on furlough, that they were very nice. People were very nice to me. America was really solid together during that time. It's too bad they aren't that way now, but they were 100% for one another. And,
do you think there's anything else you'd like to add to your interview that we've skipped over, or you're remembering, or?
Not right. It might come back in a couple of weeks.
You might have another. Well, take 2. We can do that if you like.
No, I don't remember anything. I remember being afraid of people, though. I remember I was walking around with my head down, and not until I got my job back. When I got my job back, then I was all right, because we were given I don't know, it was a discharge salary of some kind. It wasn't very much. It was enough to live on for a couple of weeks or so. But I got my job back before that ran out. So we weren't absolutely poor. I mean, absolutely destitute. But the government was very good that way. And then they had the program where you could go to school, and my wife answered an ad for an advertising agency that wanted to take one of those veterans, where the government paid your salary. Actually, they paid the company, and the company paid your salary, and you could go to school. I went to college at night. Took an art course at night, and worked for the agency during the daytime. And and the government paid for that, and that's the only way I could have been an artist. But my wife she entered that ad for me, and the guys all laughed at me when I was installing these telephones, and or telephone equipment. We worked in the telephone office, back on the mainframe with the soldering iron. Mostly it was soldering, and they laughed at me for going on that program. I'm going to be a big artist and giving up a good job to go into a big artist. Well, after that.
Who's laughing now?
After I got 2 years in, I answered an ad and I was able to hold on the job. And,
was that all part of was it the GI Bill back then too? Or
yes.
was it called something else?
The what?
The GI Bill, was that what it was called then?
I think so, yeah, the GI Bill.
Which helped you get...
It hasn't changed much, I don't think.
No.
You can still go to school if you want to. And that was a real boon, and that made the war worthwhile. I said, my wife knew I wanted to be an artist. But the Lord's been very good to me all the way. And then, and that first job was Mansfield, Ohio. You mentioned that. They had a big racetrack. Well, that's my first job. I mean, after I got on the advertising agency. But it's kind of funny, though. My boss was at the, while I was still on the GI Bill, he was planning to, my time was running out. And so he was planning to replace me with another one. And he ran an ad for somebody like that. And I answered the ad. and the art director told me that after I gave him notice that I was leaving. And he told me that our boss had run an ad to replace me already. And he didn't know I was leaving yet. But I went over to Mansfield, Ohio, and worked for an agency over there for 3 years, and then it was such a tremendous change from going to Mansfield. But a fella in the agency was going up there to look for a job, and he asked me if I wanted to go along, and I said yes. I wanted, you got to progress, So we went to Toledo. And I went to Kaiser Willey's automobile company, and that's when they were coming out with their new cars, and they were looking for somebody like me, and I got a job right away, and I'll never forget that either. That's part of it, I guess, because I was just making barely a living wage. In fact, I worked 2 jobs in Mansfield. I worked for Sheridan Roebuck on Saturdays, and they didn't work on Sunday then, but Saturdays and Thursday night, I think it was. But
so the GI Bill was able to actually get you to a future when you came back.
Absolutely.
To something you enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
As well as your lovely wife helping you get there. In many ways, yeah. All right. Well, we can wrap this up if you have nothing else to add to it. And on a personal note, Harry, I'd like to thank you for your service.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank you for the ability or the opportunity.
My
Not
pleasure.
the ability, but the ability too for that
How much
opportunity. And I'd like to thank and praise the Lord for getting me through the war. And all the other blessings. And from my wife.
Okay. Most importantly.
And I'm sorry I had to break down like this.
Yep. No reason to be sorry. We all have emotions. Those are good things.
Well, so thanks
Thank
thanks to you, and you're doing this. I want other people to know this too, that you're doing this on a volunteer basis.
you. Yeah,
So-
it's our pleasure. You are the greatest generation, and we're here to appreciate what you did. So thank you.
Well, I'm sorry I'm so emotional.